Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more Automation, the car company tycoon game, continuing on with the campaign roleplay of the Edison Car Company in 1991. Now, I've really been getting into this into the game since the recent update. I especially like the market share data that we have access to now. You get a little bit of the feeling for the campaign mode if it ever did come out. But the model we'll be looking at in this video is the Star. And we're going to go ahead and hop into the base trim for this, the standard 2.4M. Now, standard is the interior, 2.4 is the engine, 2.4 liter engine, and M stands for manual transmission. Let's go ahead and start at the beginning with the model tab. Now, the body I chose is this one here that I'm circling with my mouse pointer. It's 111-inch wheelbase, and I feel like it suits the mid-size family sedan that we're going for with the Star. And I'm going to go ahead and do a rotation here so you guys can see the styling. Now, I'm not trying to get too crazy with the styling until more options come out there in the base game. Yes, I know there's a lot of mods out there that you can add all these trim pieces to, but I don't really know how stable those will be in the future as we get more and more updates. So I'm going to be sticking with a lot of the, the basic trim that we have until more of it comes out. In any case, moving on to the chassis, we have a monocoque chassis made out of corrosion-resistant steel. Front transverse engine mounting, McPherson strut suspension in the front. We went a little bit more sophisticated with the rear suspension than the Luna. The Luna used a torsion beam rear suspension. We're using a semi-trailing arm, and you can see the direct comparison here. So it's taking us a little bit longer to produce. It's heavier, but we also gain drivability and comfort, which is a good thing. We're trying to go with a little bit more middle of the road with this vehicle. Now, torsion beam is a fantastic choice for a front-wheel drive, small compact car, but I think we're trying to go a little bit more comfort and drivability oriented vehicle here. Now, with the panel material, we also went corrosion-resistant steel rather than the polymer that the Luna was made out of. And again, that's trying to go for, you're getting better safety for sure. This is trying to be a little bit more family-oriented. The Luna is, slightly family-oriented, but, definitely safety is a good concern if you have children, for instance. Prestige is higher, so again, achieving more of that middle-of-the-road kind of status. But we're going to be weighing a lot, and that's going to be one of the big downsides between the two, as well as a little bit more production units, but that's not that big of a deal, and everything else is pretty much the same. Okay, so you've already seen the engine placement and everything like that, so let's just jump right into the engine and just get the basic stats here. So we have 116 horsepower that we're working with and 129 foot-pounds of torque. So let's hop into the trim. And with the trim, the gearbox setup is a 5-speed manual. The 5th gear is set up mostly as an economy gear, going beyond our estimated top speed to give us the best economy. Now, the economy we're getting is 22.9 miles per gallon, which I think this is the best out of the different trims that I have for this model. 0 to 62 is a little bit on the pokey side with 11.3 seconds. You can expect with the V6 this to be a much better performer, and we will be seeing that later. Now, the drivability we got was 44.1. Sportiness comes in at 14.7. Comfort at 27.1. Prestige at 16.7. Safety at 46.5. Practicality at 61.8. And utility at 19.5. And off-road at 17.9. Now, these three at the bottom, we're not as used to dealing with. Usually, we would just deal with these ones up here. But these are new concerns for us. And we already talked about all this down here, and we also have an idea of what markets we're going to be, appealing to here, and we'll be looking at that later, obviously, as well. Now, moving along, one thing I did want to mention, I do have a little bit of wheel spin here. Now, this is one thing I've really noticed with the new update, that they seemingly have changed the way wheel spin affects the vehicle, both in the penalty it provides. It's not as severe of a penalty, it seems, at least from what I've seen so far, and it doesn't seem to be as heavy as it used to be. Just comparing some old models that I had previously, it seemed like these numbers have gone down. So it's a little bit more manageable, but even still, the stance I'm taking now is it's okay in some instances to have a little bit of wheel spin, especially as I see it, it doesn't seem like the penalty is nearly as bad as it used to be. Now with the tires, we went with 185s, both front and rear. And again, I'm going with the same size front and rear because this allows you to rotate tires. That's a good thing for the consumer. Maybe if I set, the tire width a little bit wider in the front, that would be better. This is a front-wheel drive car, but we're not going to do that just because of that, versatility. And I don't know if that's modeled in the game or not, but that's something we're doing. Medium compound road and steel rim material. Moving on to the brakes, we have solid disc front brakes with 2 pistons, and pad type, I stayed pretty much neutral on this and made the brakes as big as they could be because, as you can see, we do have brake fade problems here. We did go with drums in the rear to make it a little bit more cost effective. I did kind of do a variance from that with one of our trims, and we'll see that a little bit later. Now, for the aerodynamics, I have it fully clad for the under tray, and I gave it, usually my rule is about 10 above what's required. If you have justifications for other reasons why you would have more than that, maybe you're planning this on a very hot climate, maybe, something that really needs a lot more cooling, maybe you would go with more than that, but I think this is a pretty decent standard. As far as the seating goes, I went with 5. Again, we're trying to maximize the family, orientation of this vehicle, having more passenger capacity and what have you. We have a standard interior and a standard cassette. I went with power steering, and I toyed with the idea of putting ABS system on this for standard, but I decided to go with a little bit different setup here, just using power steering as the basic, and we went with standard safety. Now, the suspension, again, we went a little bit more sophistication here, so we went with a gas monotube rather than a twin tube setup that we used in the Luna. And the setup, I pretty much went with, I think, the normal preset, but I stiffened it up where it seemed like it needed it, and we have a little bit of bias for the damper stiffness in the front, and so on, and, getting the ride height where you need it so that you're not having any bottom out. Now, with the roll angle with this, that's actually really a decent roll angle. At least as I understand it, the smaller the roll angle, the better your handling is going to be. So that's not bad. Now, with the, let's go on to the detailed stats here. And as I usually do, I'm just going to give you a few seconds to look at this. If you want to look at any of the numbers in detail, go ahead and pause it. So we have drivability, sportiness, comfort, prestige, safety, and I have been ignoring these new tabs here as this new update came out, because these were the main tabs that I have been looking at in the past. I'm not sure if I should start doing that or not. If I have people saying that they want to see these tabs as well, I'll think about it. But for now, I think I'm going to not really show those just to save time in the video. Let's go ahead and go to the test track and see how it performs. Oh, wait, I guess I should also say what we've got here. So we've got 117.3 miles an hour. So a little bit above that 100 mark. Weight distribution is pretty front heavy, which I think you can expect from a front-wheel drive car. It seems a little extreme, though. And that's one thing that I think is still a little bit of a complaint on my end, is that these weight distributions seem quite a bit off for a lot of the bodies. Some of them are good. Some of them are decent. But sometimes you get these really, really, skewed results. This might be more normal for a front-wheel drive car, but I don't know. From my memory, I think close to a 60% weight distribution is a little bit too front-heavy, but I could be wrong on that, so, it is what it is. But usually you expect a front-wheel drive car to be a little bit more front-heavy. And I guess my main complaint is there isn't really a whole lot that you can do about this. If a body is set up to be a little bit more front-heavy, it is what it is. There's not a whole lot you can do about it other than kind of morph the body around a little bit, but that only does so much. All right, moving along. Cornering Gs, that doesn't look too great, honestly. We're not getting above, 1 G. Speeds look maybe all right for the type of vehicle, but not so sure about that. All right, let's go ahead and do our run. All right, let's see the numbers we got. So 1 minute 48.17. So this base trim is definitely slower than what we got out of the Luna, but you have to keep in mind that there is a massive weight difference from having the steel body panels and the polymer body panels. So the Luna is very advantaged in that way, that it can really take advantage of that light weight to have, less power but get better acceleration numbers for sure. Okay, so that's our low-end trim. Let's look at the automatic version of that. And the main thing that's going to be the difference here is just the gearbox setup. So if we go to that, we see that it's a 4-speed automatic. Now, when I do my automatics, what I do is I don't set that last gear as more of an economy gear, only maybe very slightly beyond the top speed, to simulate a little bit better what you would see in real life with economy numbers. And also, I think with a 4-speed, I think you kind of want this, where you want the fourth gear to be more of an acceleration gear. And definitely, I'm trying to also combat a tendency, maybe a little bit too dramatic of a tendency in this game, for automatics to have a dramatically slower 0 to 62 time. I mean, we're seeing more than a second of difference, even though I tried to set up the gearbox much more aggressively, much more for, acceleration. Still, we're having an acceleration time of 12.5 seconds. I even went with a little bit more wheel spin, again, a little bit more aggressive setup, and still, we're having a little bit issues there. But as far as our stats go, we get a big bonus to our drivability, 48.5. We take a decent hit to our sportiness, though, 8.9. Comfort comes in at 30.6, prestige at 16.5, safety at 46.5, practicality at 61.8, 22.8 for utility, and 17.4 for off-road. And we can see again the categories we fall in. And I didn't do the marketing, I just realized with the manual. I think we'll do that at the end so you guys can see a back-to-back-to-back comparison maybe, so that it's a little bit more fresh in your mind. Again, this is all going to be the same, but I'm just going to kind of leaf through here so you guys can see the graphs, because this is pretty much your only chance to see that. Okay. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and look at the detailed stats as well. So we have drivability. We have sportiness. We have comfort. And I'm noticing a slight difference in the stats, even though we didn't change anything. That's interesting. Prestige, safety, and I think that's going to be it for the tabs. So let's go to our test track. So we're seeing a little bit of a drop in our top speed, and we have already mentioned the 0 to 62 differences. Cornering Gs and speeds look roughly the same. Weight distribution, we're a little bit more front heavy. And the weight, it looks like it's a little bit heavier as well, from what I remember. So let's do our time. We're going to expect this to be slower, obviously. So let's do that. Yep. We actually didn't achieve what I normally set out to do, which is achieving a better than 1 minute 50 time. So yeah, the 2.4 liter engine is really pokey in this car. We're going to see a lot better performance once we jump into the 3 liter versions. But as it is, the 2.4 is really, really pokey. So let's jump into the 3 liter engine. And we have 3 trims for this. And I kind of went with something a little bit different with this, in that I made a standard 3 liter trim, but only as an automatic. And we can see that there is definitely some changes in stats here. So we lose out in drivability versus our other automatic, but we gain out in some other stats. Let's go ahead and just jump right to actually the engine, now that we put in a different engine. So we can see the stats we have. So we've got 163 foot-pounds of torque and 146 horsepower. So definitely, a big gain in horsepower there, at least for this type of car. 30 horsepower. Okay, now that we're in the gearbox setup, we can go ahead and look at this. So again, same kind of setup. I think I went a little bit further with the fourth gear into making this economy gear. Now we do see a drop off in the economy here, which is to be expected. This is a more powerful engine. 0 to 62 time though has definitely come down. And keeping in mind that this is an automatic, and our we've already, you can go ahead and look at the stats. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think there's slight variances here and there. But we are also looking at more wheel spin for sure. As I did set this gearbox up a little bit more aggressively. Now the tire and wheel and everything is going to be the same, as well as the brakes. But you're going to expect to see a little bit more brake fade because we're asking more out of the engine. But I also noticed that we see a difference in weight as well. We're adding on about roughly 50 pounds from what I remember. Cooling airflow has changed because this engine requires more. So again, we went with roughly around that 10 above the required. Interior, we're going to see about the same. And suspension setup is going to be different because we have to take into account that difference in weight. And then finally, we're going to look at our detailed stats. So we've got drivability, sportiness, comfort, prestige, and safety. Now, one thing I've noticed with this new update is it's very difficult to get a direct comparison between your previous model oftentimes. And again, I'm noticing a stat variance even though we didn't change anything. So it was 47.7, now it's 47.9. I don't know what that's all about, but that's the second time that's happened. Let's look at our test track. So again, we have a little bit quicker acceleration. Cornering G looks pretty much identical. I don't notice any difference there. We're even more front heavy though, from what I could see which makes sense. A little bit heavier engine. Top speed goes up to 124.1. And let's go ahead and look at our track time. So we drop back down. We're, I think, more in the ballpark of what the Luna was achieving. So we're finally overcoming that weight difference that we had between the Luna and this. All right, let's look at one of our last trims, which is the premium trim. Now, mostly the difference between the standard 3.0 and the premium is just the interior. So we've got premium interior, premium cassette, but we add on an ABS system as standard for this trim. I, again, toyed with traction control, but I decided against it. In any case, we see the differences in the stats here. Now, the reason your drivability has gone up is mostly because of that ABS system. And the other stat differences are going to be because of the difference in weight, which is a pretty big difference, as you can see here. If we look, though, at the gearbox, I think the gearbox is roughly set up the same, and no, I did change it a little bit. I think I made it a little bit more aggressive because I think the spacing was set at 49 with the standard. I bumped that up to 51 because I wanted to try and combat that weight difference. So the wheel spin ends up being, I think, roughly the same, but if I hadn't done that, the wheel spin would have been a little bit less, but the acceleration would have been worse. So I tried to, again, combat that difference and make it a little bit less of a thing, and I definitely want this to have a better 0 to 62 time than the 2.4-liter engine, which it's barely achieving. Okay, all that said, let's go ahead and jump in and just look at the detailed stats again. So we have drivability, we have sportiness, we have comfort, we've got prestige, and finally we have safety. So let's look at our test track here. So we drop a little bit in top speed and also in 0 to 62 time. And finally, we're actually seeing a difference in the cornering G. It looks slightly worse. And weight distribution, I think, is actually better than the other V6 version. And I think that's because we have more weight throughout the entire vehicle. But let's go ahead and do our track time. You're going to expect it to be worse, but definitely better than it was with the standard, the 2.4-liter engine. But as you can see, if you want a premium trim, the only way you can get that is with the upgrade to the 3-liter engine. That's kind of done purposefully. Now we have one last trim, and this is kind of an experimental trim. And what I thought I would do is I would make a sport version of the 3-liter engine. So we don't have a manual transmission like standard version. This is just pretty much the standard version, a little bit sportified. So gearbox is set up 5-speed gearbox, but I think I went a little bit, less economy oriented with this than I did with the other trims. Not much of a variance, I don't think. And again, a little bit more aggressive. I think this is the one that has the most wheel spin. But as we can see, 0 to 62 time, a lot better, 9.3 seconds. And also the fuel economy is pretty decent as well for the V6 versions. Now, the tires didn't really change. Now, I could have put Sport Compound Road on here, which I thought about doing, but I didn't. And, I still wanted this to be, semi-normalish car, just a little bit sporty. But the main difference you're going to have immediately is I changed the drum brakes to solid disc 2-piston brakes in the rear. And again, this is one that I really, went back and forth in my mind on. And I think also the brakes are a little bit different in size because I achieved, the maximum potential for the brakes in the rear. So I actually decreased them in size, which is going to save us a little bit in weight and cost. Not much changed here. And the interior, I thought about putting ABS in this, but I didn't. And another big change is with the suspension. I went with a little bit more sporty feel, not dramatic, but a little bit more of a sporty feel. And let's go ahead and see what our results are. Well, first, let's look at the detailed stats as we've done before. So we have drivability, we have sportiness, comfort, prestige, and safety. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, this has the best sportiness value that we've seen so far. Let's look at our test track. So 126.6 miles an hour. I don't remember if that's our biggest top speed, but the main thing here is acceleration, 9.3. Big improvement. Our cornering Gs, it looks slightly worse than what we got out of the 2.4-liter versions, but you have to keep in mind that this is heavier. And our weight distribution looks about the same as it was with our premium trim, although I think our standard 3.0 automatic version was a little bit more front heavy. All right, let's go ahead and do the track time because this is all what all of these changes have been about. So let's see if we've got the improvement we were looking for. And we definitely have. With 1 minute 44.09. So big improvement there over what we got from the automatic version, the standard automatic version of this car. More than 2 seconds. So that's what we were going for, a little bit more sportiness out of this. Okay, now that we've gone through all that, I want to look at the market data. Now, I'm not going to try and focus on this too much detail, but I kind of want to see how these vehicles performed. So let's look at the market tab. Now, just as I did with the Luna, I gave everything a 5% markup, which did change in these values as well. But, if you did 0%, as this says, I think, if you get the tab, there we go. If you just sold it for 0%, all you're doing is covering the cost of building the car. You're not getting any profit from it. So I went with a 5% markup. Now, I don't know if that would be reasonable or not, a 5% markup, but that's what we're going to go for, and we're going to stick with that markup for all of our models from here on out, so we can see, a comparable thing every time that we're getting that same markup. All right, with all that said, the main categories we're in is family sport, family, and commuter, which I believe was the same as it was for the Luna. But the thing that we're more satisfying, at least as far as competitiveness, is the family sport category, which I think makes a little bit more sense because of the manual transmission. And we'll see as soon as I hop into the automatic version of that same trim that will change. So let's go ahead and go in here. And we see that, yes, family sport is still kind of our biggest category here. We've noticed that we've seen a pretty marked improvement in the other categories. I think one of the big reasons that this isn't performing as well in the other categories is because of this affordability. You're noticing that with the family sport, much more of this market finds this an affordable car than the family or commuter markets that this is, well suited for possibly. So that's, something to consider. And now let's hop into another trim here. Now, the one thing I've noticed is that the 3-liter versions seemingly are going to flip this even more so and perform a little bit better in the markets. Now, whether or not they're as affordable is another thing, but we notice the stats increase in pretty much all categories. I think maybe a little bit of a drop in the family, but the sport is at 78. So again, we see this dynamic where the family sport is the category that this, the group, the market group that finds this the most competitive, or the category that this vehicle falls more in. Now, I didn't do that on purpose. This is just the way that it worked. And this is kind of the fascinating element of this new update to me, is maybe you're building a car and you want it to be a family car, but it really is the family sport crowd that finds it interesting or finds it more competitive. So that's the thing that I find kind of fascinating. And it, again, could have been that this is just not very affordable for a lot of people. So that might be bringing the stats down as well. And again, commuters. So it pretty much the commuter and the family sport are the two big ones, and then family a little bit after that. Okay, now that we've done that, let's hop into another trim. So we're going to hop into the premium trim. We'll do the sport one last, because I think we'll see a little bit of market change with that one. So here we're seeing a shift. So it's not that the family category or the commuter category doesn't necessarily like these cars. They're still kind of green. But family sport is still a big category for us. But instead, we shift to the premium commuter and premium family. But we're not that competitive because I don't think that this vehicle is quite good enough. We're well suited as far as the affordability. A lot of the people in these market groups can afford this vehicle, but maybe it's not quite as comfortable as that they want. Comfort is a big element of the score that we're getting for this. So that is probably why we're not getting the same higher numbers that we were getting with the other ones, because we've changed a market segment. Here this is a different market group, but still this is now the focus of this vehicle. It's a little bit more premium oriented, but we're still in the family sport. We didn't quite reach the family sport premium yet. So, that's something to consider. But if we had, more of this group would find this affordable. But we're noticing now with family sport, not as many are finding this affordable in this group. They still prefer it in this group, but not as affordable. Okay, now that we also see like some of the ones that are highlighted, for instance, premium budget kind of favors this car a little bit, things like that. All right, let's get into our last trim. And I actually don't remember how this one looks, but I think I remember finding it pretty interesting. All right, so we've got family sport, big category again for us. It's our best category across the board. Commuter still favored, but now we're actually into the pony category. Now, we're not quite fitting a lot of the things that people look for a pony car. First, we're front-wheel drive, not rear-wheel drive. So not really fitting that market segment as well. Affordability, not as affordable as maybe these people are looking for. We're getting a little bit of a modifier here for the pony. The body is too old, but that's interesting. We're not getting that modifier in other areas. And I thought I was using a newer body. That's interesting. I didn't get anything telling me that body was older. Normally, when you're selecting the body, somewhere, I think it's in the suspension, it lets you know that the body is older. So I find that interesting because we didn't see that anywhere else. So that's weird. I didn't notice that before. But in any case, But we're noticing that more of the sporty groups are starting to take an interest in this vehicle. It's not our big categories. For instance, Fun Premium is starting to take a look at this, but they're not getting quite as a good competitive score. But affordability is good here. Also, the muscle category is kind of taking an interest in this. Again, this isn't necessarily well suited for that, but they're taking an interest in it. We also have, sport budget is starting to take an interest in it. And that's kind of maybe what we were going for with this. But again, you still have that family sport idea and a little bit more into that. It seems like, from what I remember, though, that we had some vehicles that performed better than this one in that family sport. So maybe we didn't achieve what we were looking for with this trim. And I'll admit, this trim was kind of experimental with what I was going for. And maybe it didn't quite achieve what I was looking for as far as the competitiveness. Because in the end, a lot of what you're doing to building these cars is trying to get them to meet the market segments and getting sales, right? And if you don't achieve what you're kind of looking for, maybe it's not quite as big of a success as you thought. But in any case, as I said, very fascinating, this new market data, and we can really get a good idea of how good we're doing, of a job we're doing. I mean, we're trying to go for a mid-size family sedan. Did we achieve that? It seems like, to me, for the most part, we did, but maybe we didn't meet the market groups we were necessarily going for. For instance, maybe we're going a little bit more for the family group, and we ended up with the family sport group. Maybe this is a smaller segment of the market share, so maybe that's not going to be as good for us as far as sales, because not very many people can afford, in the family segment, our vehicle. Maybe it's just too expensive. So that's a lot of things to consider with this new update. But in any case, I think we're pretty much looked at mostly what we have with this vehicle. We can go ahead and do a quick comparison here between our different trims. So as far as drivability, the trim that does the best is our Premium 3.0, followed by our standard 2.4 automatic. So these ones are, I guess, makes sense. And also our standard 3.0 automatic is not far off. So we roughly achieve about the same numbers as far as drivability goes with these three automatic transmissions, and our manual transmissions drop down quite a bit because of that. Sportiness, the Sport 3.0 wins. Makes sense. That's what we set it up for. So there you go. And right behind it is our other manual transmission version, and then our automatics falling behind. Comfort. No surprise, our premium trim with the automatic transmission won out here. Our other automatics went out over our manual because there is a modifier for the transmission. As far as prestige, this I didn't really keep that much of an eye on, but as far as I can tell, this is falling more along the engine, and then we're getting a little bit of a bonus with the premium interior here, which makes sense. As far as our safety goes, this is going to fall right along the lines of weight. So the standard 2.4M is the lightest of the bunch, so it's the least safe. Otherwise, the safety options are pretty much the same. I honestly would like to see the ABS system and maybe some of the traction control and other the other systems, the driver aids, actually having an impact on this, because maybe I think the way that they're doing this, though, is the safety is how it takes an impact. Whereas ABS and traction control wouldn't have anything to do with that. I think what the idea is, drivability is what helps you avoid an accident. So that's why you're getting a big bonus there, and you're not seeing anything in safety. It might not be very intuitive, but I think that's the way that they're going for it. So this is how the vehicle takes a crash, not how it avoids a crash. So in that way, we're just seeing weight being the main determining factor here. Now, I believe this is practicality. They don't yet have the tabs that give you what these are, so I'm just having to remember what the symbols are. But I'm pretty sure this is practicality, which we didn't really see a difference between the different trims. And as far as I can tell, again, this is maybe not as intuitive of a category. I did look at this a little bit more in my my last vehicle, my last model. And this one I'm still a little confused with, because it doesn't seem like there's ever really a variance no matter what you do. It's pretty much seemingly completely dependent upon what body you pick. This is off-road. Interestingly enough, the Sport did the best, which I would have never expected, but that's the way it went. I'm going to assume manual transmissions get a little bit of a bonus because it seems like both of these did better than the automatics, which I think makes sense. So that's not too surprising. I believe this is utility, which it seems like the 3-liter versions do. I was going to say the 3-liter versions do better, but it looks like automatic transmission here did better. That's maybe something I would want to look at because it's interesting to see that there's only one trim out of this model that isn't as good in the utility as the others. Then we have reliability. Interestingly enough, the Sport version is the most reliable, which is kind of surprising to me because I'm going to assume the engine has something to do with that because if you look at the standard 3.0 automatic versus the standard 2.4 automatic, the only difference between these is the engine, and it looks like we got a full point there. So it looks like our manual transmission versions are a little bit more reliable, which I guess that makes sense. Manual transmissions, they don't have as much, complexity as an automatic transmission does. So that's a concern. It is what it is, but it looks like we get a little bit of a penalty maybe for the automatics, I'm going to assume. Economy goes along the lines of the engines, but also the transmissions. So we see that our manual transmission V6 does better than our 2.4 automatic, but it's not a big difference, as big of a difference as you see between the manual V6 and the automatic V6, for instance, or the manual 2.4 and the automatic 2.4. So mostly transmission is a big determining here, but the way I set up those transmission or gearbox is a big determiner of this as well. Weights, I think pretty much this goes in line of what transmission I used and then what the engine, and also the interior's choices here. So again, makes sense. Emissions, looks like our 2.4 liter engine is a little bit better, but looks like the manual transmission has effect on that as well. In any case, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Again, we've got production units, and I think this is going to fall pretty much in the way that you would expect it to. Interestingly enough, with the choices that we made, our Sport trim is actually cheaper and takes about the same. Oh no, not quite cheaper. I apologize. It takes the same production units, but it's more expensive. I think that is, we expected it to be more expensive. I'm a little bit surprised it doesn't take more production units to produce, but I guess the differences between the brakes, which is going to be the main difference, doesn't really affect that. In any case, as I said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I'm really getting into, with the new update, the market share data, and I think we're going to be looking at that more and more as I continue on with these videos, because I think that's the biggest determiner of, whether we're doing what we want to be doing with the builds. I might actually stop doing these direct comparisons here, unless you guys are really enjoying this at the end. I might more focus on that market share data in the future, because again, I think that's a little bit more important for that campaign role play, because we're kind of getting an indicator of whether or not we're succeeding at the market we want to succeed at. In any case, as I said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner, signing out.